Hi, everyone. Welcome to Demystifying Credit. My name is Sue Harmon. I am a librarian at the Manchester City Library. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're watching this recording, thank you for joining us in the recording. This is Demystifying Credit, presented by Amy Morin of St. Mary's Bank. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. And sorry, things are all moved around. And this program is being recorded for future viewing. I'll be putting a link into the chat window at the end of the program. Please follow that link and fill out a brief survey. Your responses really do help us. Let us know what types of programs you'd like to see in the future and give us your email to sign up for our newsletter and for all of our upcoming programs and library news. To be entered into the drawing for the raffle, you must give us your email, but you can be opted out to sign up for the newsletter. Speaking of upcoming programs, I just want to let you know about some that are coming up in the next several weeks. Monday, June 7th, we have the Abolitionists of Noise Academy. You can come learn about Noise Academy in Canaan, New Hampshire, one of the first integrated co-ed schools in the country. On Tuesday, June 15th at 11 a.m., we're going to have our first session of senior storytelling. This is a conversational group led by Dr. Ed Mahoney from the Mental Health Center of Greater Manchester. Sessions will be held every other Tuesday starting on June 15th at 11 a.m. On Tuesday, June 22nd at 6, we have New England Lighthouses and the People Who Kept Them. Jeremy Dentremont is a president and historian for the American Lighthouse Foundation. He'll be joining us to share the history of New England's historic and picturesque lighthouses. On Thursday, June 24th at 6:30, we also have the first session of the picture book writing workshop. Children's author Terry Farish will conduct a two-part workshop on writing picture books. To sign up for any of these programs or get more information about upcoming programs, you can visit www.manchesterlibrary.org. Lastly, this summer, the library will be running a summer reading program for adults. Sign up for the program starts June 1st, so look out for information on how to register on Facebook, our blog, and the newsletter. And for more information, you can visit our blog or our Facebook page. Our presenter today is Amy Morin. She's a business analyst at St. Mary's Bank and has been with the credit union for 10 years and has worked in many member-facing positions throughout her time there. Amy has a master's in adult education and training, is a mom of three, an avid reader, and a Manchester native who currently resides in the North End. And now, without further ado, I will hand it off to Amy. Thank you so much.
Right, so today we're focusing on demystifying credit. So we have a couple different topics to cover. The first thing we're going to talk about today is credit scores. What are they? How do they work? You know, what's kind of the mystery behind them, and hopefully give some good insight into that and make you better educated for when you need to understand and know more about your own credit score. So before there were credit scores, there was just no way to measure risk. So what would happen is you would apply for a loan, and it was up to whoever was on the receiving end of that application to say, yep, we'll give this person the money, or nope, this doesn't make sense. We're not going to lend them the funds. So basically individuals were judging those applications, and there wasn't really a standard. So what is a credit score? What it actually is it's just a number that financial institutions use, and it helps us to determine what kind of risk level that someone is so that we can actually lend them funds. You may be familiar with the term FICO, Fair Isaac Corporation. So FICO is the most widely used credit score. It was introduced in '89 and by the Fair Isaac and Company. So that's where we get that FICO acronym from. Credit bureaus, there's three different credit bureaus. There's Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. And each of them actually use a different formula for calculating your score. And also what a lot of people don't realize too is the type of loan that you're applying for also follows a different formula. So the credit score you have for, say, an auto loan might be a little bit different than the credit score you receive for, say, a mortgage. So very different scores that people use, different calculations behind those scores. And that's part of why using some of those apps like Credit Karma and things like that can be a little bit different when you use that app. And then you go and actually apply for that loan. And then you say, geez, you know, I thought my credit score was a 720, but this, when you guys pulled it, it was a 700. So that's where those discrepancies can kind of come into play, is that they're different for different loan types. So, and they're different for different bureaus that are used. So what does your score actually mean? So most scores are between 300 and 850. The lower the score, the higher the risk you are of paying back the funds that are borrowed. So that's why you tend to have a higher interest rate if you have a low score. If you have a high score, that means that you have a good reputation or a good chance, a good less of a risk of paying back the funds. So you tend to have a lower score when you a lower rate when you have a higher score. A low score is anything considered around 550 and lower. This exact number varies depending on different financial institutions. So some of them consider, you know, in the 600s low. Some of them consider, you know, 550 or 500. So this is a little bit of a range. But for this presentation, you know, 550 and lower is a lower one. And typically scores this low do result in being in denials, right? So not moving forward with the funds. Middle of the range is just, you know, a little bit higher of a risk. You know, people who have scores in this, it's nothing bad necessarily, just sometimes you have too much debt, or you know, you're maxing out your credit cards. Doesn't mean you're not paying them back on time. It just, you might just have like a lot of debt or using up your line. So it could contribute to those scores dropping a little bit. And of course, missing payments is a big contributor for that. And then anything high, this is where you want to be. Anything I would even say 700, but 720 and higher is really where you want your score to be. This is the best rates. This is, you know, the lowest rates. You're paying the least amount in interest to whatever financial institution you're working with. So why does your score actually matter? Scores can influence renting an apartment, right? Your landlord wants to make sure that you're going to make the rental payment on time every month. And that can be your credit bureau is one way that they can see how you make payments. Are you going to make them in a steady fashion? Do you pay them on time? Student loans is a big one, right? They don't want to lend you money to go to college if you can't pay it back. So that would be one. Car payments for sure, right? You know, we don't want to lend out funds and then find out that we have to go repossess the vehicle to get the funds back. So that's a big process. It's a cost to the financial institution. You know, it's really bad for the individual. So, you know, this is how a credit score can influence that. And then job applications too. Sometimes people want to see how responsible you are, right? Do you pay things back? Do you pay things on time? Do you max out your debt? You know, how are you being responsible in your life so that you can do a good job in your work life? So those are some things that they look at. So how is a score actually calculated? The best way to talk about it is to think about it like a pie chart. So the biggest piece that contributes to your credit score is your payment history. So that means making your payments on time every month, right? Not missing payments, having consistent on-time payments. The next biggest chunk, so more than 50% of your of how the score is calculated is your capacity too. So that 30% here, the next biggest chunk is your capacity. And your capacity means, let's say it's how much of your unsecured debt is being utilized. So think about a credit card. You might be approved for a $10,000 credit card. If you're only using if you only have a balance of $1,000, then you have 90% capacity. So that's really great, right? You have a big chunk that is freed up. It's available to, but it's not being utilized. And then the next things are things that I think people often think are difficult or contribute really highly to your score. So things like having how long you've had a credit card or how long you've had a loan out, that certainly does contribute, but it's a very small percentage, only 15%. New credit is 10, and then a mix of credit is 10. So here a lot of times members will come in and they'll say, oh, I won't close this credit card because I've had it open for 10 years or something like that. And yes, while that might contribute to, lowering your score, it's not like a huge piece of how it's calculated. A mix of credit is another thing that I think people think I have to have a credit card, a car loan, I've got to have a student loan, a mortgage, right? Like every type of loan out there. And yes, it's good to see some diversity in a credit portfolio, because it shows that, if we just see car loans, short-term car loans, it doesn't really, and then now you're applying for a credit card, it doesn't give us a good idea about how you are with your credit limits in that capacity piece, right? Capacity as well, it talks about your debt to income. So how much money do you make versus how much your bills are? So you want to make sure that, you're not at, most of your paycheck isn't going to all of your debt, right? You want to have a larger amount of your paycheck free, your income free, and not contributing directly to any debt that you have. So that's another piece in the capacity calculation as well. So 35% is, again, making those payments on time. That will help boost your score. How much capacity, again, is how much of your available credit you actually use. The less, the better. Maxing out your cards is not good for you. How long you've had your credit, length of credit, that contributes a small amount. It looks really good when we see that you've had something for a long time and you've consistently paid it, because it gives us a better picture into what kind of risk we're taking. New credit, opening a lot of things in a small period of time will definitely lower your score. It looks very irresponsible. It also is indicative of fraud. So these are red flags for us, for financial institutions. So it's something you definitely want to take a look at. And then mix of credit, differences between revolving credit, so that means like credit cards, things that don't have an end date, and then installment loans, things like mortgages or car loans. Those are things that do have an end date, right? You take out a 5-year car payment or car loan. That means after 5 years, that loan ceases to exist theoretically, right? You would have paid it off after 5 years. So that's an installment loan. So you want to have a mix of things that are open-ended and a mix of things that are closed-ended as well. Keeping track of your score. Every single major bureau gives you a free copy of your credit score, of your credit bureau every year for free. So I would highly encourage you to do this. It is very good for your credit health, your financial health to do that. The best place to go is annualcreditreport.com. Yes, they will ask you some personal information, but it is a trusted source. You can certainly provide what you need to obtain those credit bureaus. One thing that you might want to do is each bureau allows you to get one report free every year. So if you space out the 3 bureaus and pull one every 4 months or so, or one every couple months, then you'll be able to every year check in on yourself for free. There are some other ways that you can continue to check on your credit. One thing I highly recommend is Credit Karma, and that is a really great thing. It gives you little tools. It is an app. I don't have stock in the company or anything like that. I don't own it or anything, but it is a great tool that we often recommend to members. It's free, it's secure, it's easy. So it's a nice way to kind of also keep up on what's going on with your score and with trade lines on your bureau. When you do get your credit report or your credit bureau, you want to look at what are the account openings on there. So if you have 3 car loans, do you have 3 car loans on your credit bureau, right? Like everything you have should match what's on your bureau. And if something doesn't, that's a red flag, and you may want to look into that a little bit more, right? Like if you had a 4th car loan and you're like, what? I only have 3 cars. How is this possible? Right? You might want to look into that. It could be an error. You want to look at things that are closed too. Maybe you thought you had a credit card open for quite a long time, and now all of a sudden it's closed, but you never closed it. it, you know, it could be an error. You want to take a look at that. You also want to make sure things are closing properly, right? So if you had a car loan and you paid it off, you want to make sure that that shows as paid off on your bureau to ensure that you're not getting dinged for missing a payment that isn't due. So those are things that you want to take a peek at. Look at your repayment history. Were you marked 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, but you never were? You'd want to dispute those things. And then just also take a look at just what do you have, right? Do you only have credit cards? Do you only have auto loans or personal loans, those installment loans that we talked about? If you do, you may want to think about branching out and doing something a little bit different, getting another type of loan the next time you need one to try to help boost your score a little bit. If you do need to access your credit score, it will not be on the credit reports that you receive from the bureaus. You can do it through the bureau, but there's typically a fee. And again, that Credit Karma will give you a really good idea of what your score is. So again, it's not going to be exact for all those reasons that we talked about before, where there's different formulas from different bureaus, and also the different types of credit, like a mortgage. The score we pull for a mortgage is a little bit different than the score that's pulled for let's say a car loan or something. So definitely, you know, it's a good just baseline for you. So that's all that we have right now for the credit score piece. So I will just take just a quick moment and give you guys some time to maybe ask any questions you might have. And I will get the next presentation set up while we do that. All right. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is directly related to credit scores, and this is how to actually boost your credit score. So some things to keep in mind is that really the number one thing that's going to boost your score, like we just talked about, what's comprised of your score, think about that pie chart, is your payment history. So consistently making payments on time. It's great that you've made payments on time once in a blue, but if you also have a bunch of different, you know, lengths of being late, like 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, sprinkled throughout, that's not a good indicator to financial institutions. If you're new to credit, especially, or if you're trying to rebuild your credit, a good way to start is to open one small credit card and use it for small regular payments. Things like gas, or maybe your cable bill, you know, little things like that that you know are going to happen every month that are a manageable payment, something that's small, and that way it's regular and you can continue to stay on top of that. Paying your bills on time is also directly contributes to, you know, having the best score. The later you are, the worse your score will get, and that shows that you're not going to be a reliable consumer to pay back those loans. If you are having trouble making your payments on time and consistently, we always encourage people to use email alerts, use some kind of reminder app, use a calendar on your phone, use bill pay or automate your payments. All kinds of things are available. Tools are out there available for you to either remind yourself to make a payment or to, you know, have it made automatically without you, you know, kind of set it and forget it, automatic payments. Personally, I use a bill tracker app. I just put every bill in there, when it's due, how often it's due, whether it's monthly, biweekly, etc. And then it just pops up on my phone a few days before it's due. And then I know to go in and take a look at that, and I can mark it paid. So that's another really helpful tool. It works for me personally, but there's lots of different things out there that you can utilize. To actually build your credit, you want to really think about how do you operate? What's your borrowing behavior? What's the relationship between your financial activity and your credit score? So what we mean by that is if you're getting a credit card, you really don't want to carry a balance. It's not a good thing to do because credit card is still a loan. It's borrowed money. It's funds that you don't have in your account or isn't coming out of your account. So you never want to spend more than what you have in your account or more than what you could afford to pay. And that's what credit cards allow people to do sometimes, and it's very tempting. It's easy to get in the habit of just throwing something on the credit card. Just throw this dinner on the credit card. We'll pay for it next paycheck. Just throw this, new whatever on the credit card. Very easy to do that, to treat it as that extra income. And then what happens is it just snowballs. So while there's many benefits to a credit card, carrying a balance is something you should really try to avoid. You also want to keep your utilization low. And this is that second big factor that we talked about in the last presentation, is that capacity. So a really good target is to be at only 10% of your available credit. So of course you can go over that, right? People need credit cards and need to use your card for, emergency situations, all kinds of different reasons that you might actually end up using more than 10% of what's available to you. And that's perfectly fine. You just don't want to make it a habit, and you don't want to keep it at a high amount all the time and carry that throughout every month, not be able to get that capacity down. To figure out how to calculate your credit card utilization, just going to skip down a little bit. You want to take how much your minimum payment is compared to how much your limit is, add both of those figures. So in this case, it's $580 for both cards in the month is their minimum payment, plus and then in these examples, the credit limit total is $1,500, and then you divide that, and that will actually give you a percentage. So in this example here, their utilization, they're using 39% of their credit limit. So that's what you want to just be taking a look at, right? So you can easily figure this out, figure out how much your payment is due versus the limit, and then that 39%, and that will give you that figure that you need. And remember, we want this to be down around the 10% mark. That 10% is what will boost your score. So if you actually take a look at some of your credit card debt and do this calculation, you'll be able to figure out how much you need to pay off to get to that 10%, which would then boost your score. So I encourage you to go home, log into your credit card account, which you're probably home now, log into your credit card account, take a look at what you owe, take a look at your credit limit, make that division, and then you'll see where you're at with your utilization. The other thing that we talked about too is that new credit, right? So seeing lots of new accounts, lots of new credit cards in a small amount of time is not a good way to boost your score. It actually lowers your score. It's often seen as a red flag as well. So for instance, you go to Old Navy, and what do they say to you at the checkout? Do you want to open an Old Navy card today? You're going to save 10%. So you say yes, and then you go to Home Depot and you make a large purchase, and what do they say to you there? Do you want to put this on your Home Depot card? If you open a new one today, you'll save 30%, right? So all those little kitschy, discounts and things like that come to you when people are offering you these cards. It may seem like, great, I just bought, a new grill and it's very expensive, or maybe, a new lawnmower or something, it's very expensive. So I'll get 30% off of this. Of course, I'm going to take this deal. It's a good deal for you now, but if you're doing that with all these stores and opening all these little credit cards, it can often be a bad look on the credit bureau. And then lastly, mixing it up, right? We want to make sure you just have a variety of different types of credit. It just helps to build a bigger picture, a fuller picture of how an individual is able to pay back different kinds of loans and handle their funds. So it's a good way that if you have a couple different types of things like those closed-end loans like auto loans, mortgages, things like that, and then a mix of those open-ended loans such as credit cards, a line of credit, things like that, and that will help boost your score too. Important reminder to, again, look at your credit report. Don't be scared of it. It's a good tool for you. You can understand how your score is comprised, what you need to work on to boost your score. It's a good way to just make sure your identity is in check, nothing's being stolen, nothing's reporting bad. Mistakes do happen. So if you did pay off an item and it's still showing up, you're going to want to give that vendor a call. You're going to want to, follow up on those things, because a lot of times it's not you, right? It's an error. Just a reminder too, the big three are Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. So those are the three big credit bureaus here. So those are the ones that you guys can go right to their website and check those out. When you request your score, it does not affect your credit, even though that's like a big common misconception that it is affected. So it does not affect your score. So you can definitely do that. All right, so we will pause again and stop for questions. Right. Next one we have is comparing cards. So there's all kinds of different cards that are available to people. How you use them, different pros and cons, but how you use them can make a big impact on, your credit score, your credit report. So let's talk about the different cards that there are. There are debit cards, credit cards, and then there's also such a thing as a prepaid debit cards. We'll kind of track down the differences between these three things, and then you can make good decisions about when it's applicable or when it's appropriate to use each one. So a debit card is directly linked to your checking account. So that means whatever money you have in your account, that's your limit. That's how much you can actually spend. If you don't have those funds, you're not borrowing anything, you're not paying interest on it, right? It comes right out of your paycheck. A credit card is different. It is technically a loan, and people tend to forget this piece, that it is a loan. We're lending you this money, which means you have to pay it back. But there is a credit limit, right? We will lend you up to a certain amount. So maybe your credit card has a $10,000 limit, but maybe your checking account only has $2,000 in it. So your debit card would only allow you $2,000, but your credit card might allow you to spend up to $10,000. So big difference between the two. Prepaid debit cards, a lot of people think that this actually builds credit. It does not build your credit. It's also not something that links to your checking account. You can kind of think of a prepaid debit card almost like a gift card type of thing. So you load a certain amount of money on it, and then you can only use those funds, however much is loaded onto that particular card. There is an approval process for some of these. So for a debit card, you might have to meet certain requirements depending on the checking account that you get from your financial institution. For a credit card, it is a loan. So again, you have to be at least 18 years old to even apply. In the process, there's an approval process based on things like your income, your credit score, different pieces like that. So it's definitely, kind of that traditional loan route. And then the prepaid debit card, anybody can get one. You can go to like a Walmart, a CVS, and you can grab one. There's not really an approval process for these in particular. Sometimes there are fees. With a debit card, there typically isn't a fee associated by just having a card itself in and of itself. Typically, the fees are assessed on based on different requirements of the checking account, and your debit card is that access point to the checking account. So some of those fees are typically, dictated by the type of checking that you have. Sometimes they're waived depending on different criteria as well. If you have a certain direct deposit, you won't get a service fee. If you do e-statements, we're not going to charge you a statement fee, things like that. Credit cards, almost every credit card has an annual fee. And if you find a card out there that does not charge an annual fee, that is awesome. However, they tend to have a higher interest rate. So you want to monitor that too. Sometimes it's worth paying the annual fee because even by paying that, it's less than you might pay in interest, unless you're really great about your credit cards and you don't carry a balance. And then prepaid cards, sometimes they do have activation fees. Also, sometimes the prepaid debit cards have a spending time frame. So you have to spend all the funds on the card in a certain period of time. And if you don't, they'll start eating away at some of that money, charging you a small fee each month after until the card is used. So make sure you're looking at that fine print if you're someone that holds on to those gift cards and debit cards. Obviously, fee types vary depending on the financial institutions that you're getting these things from. But with debit cards, depending on how you have your account set up and how it's tied to your card, you could get overdraft fees if you're spending more than what's allowed in your, than what's available in your checking account. There could be limit fees. There may even be ATM fees if you don't use an ATM within that financial institution. For credit cards, you could get late fees, missed payment fees. There's oftentimes cash advance fees, and these are very high and very difficult to pay down sometimes. And you might be paying even extra interest on balances that you have. And for prepaid cards, oftentimes there's a reload fee if you want to use the same card. There might be a fee to get the cash directly at using an ATM. And maybe some transaction fees. A lot of times you see these if you're going internationally or something, you might get a fee there. How does your credit score tie into these different card types? For a debit card, it makes zero influence on your score. Same thing with a debit card. These are not connected to reporting to your bureau in any way, shape, or form. So there's no influence there. But of course, since a credit card is technically a loan, that certainly does affect your credit score. So you want to be really responsible about how you use your card. You're not using it as extra income, because there's a lot of people that a credit card has been their downfall with when it comes to their credit score. That overspending, maxing out your cards, not being able to afford what you're putting on the card can really dig a deep hole. So definitely something to be really cognizant of. Now, one of the best parts about credit cards is the rewards programs that they offer. So a lot of times credit cards have things like cash back. They might have gift cards or vacations, different things like that, that depending on what you do, you might get some benefits, some rewards, some perks. And those are all really great. But again, they only end up being great if you're responsible about them. There are a few, believe it or not, programs out there where there's reward programs for debit cards. I worked at a financial institution a long time ago that gave 4% back, cash back on when you use your debit card. So really cool stuff that are out there. So definitely, if that's something you're interested in, maybe you like the idea of the rewards, but you're a little nervous about the credit card aspect, do some digging and you might be able to find a financial institution that offers rewards programs in connection with the debit card usage. Some of them may offer, some of the prepaid cards may offer a rewards program. I've never heard of one, but it's possible that they're out there. What about protection, right? This is like a big deal. What's really cool about a debit card is that you are protected very well with debit and credit cards if you lose your card and you report it stolen and someone uses it, right? Like you don't have to just eat those charges. So consumers are well protected with debit cards and credit cards. The really nice thing about cards too is, if you lose cash, you are out the cash, right? But if you lose a debit card or a credit card, you're just out a piece of plastic as long as you close the card in time, right? So if somebody picked up your debit card and you realized it and you closed the card, they could go swipe that little piece of plastic anywhere that they want and they're not going to get far. They can't get anything and it would be closed. So it's a nice way to be connected to your checking account, but also be very protected because there's like a layer in between you. So, that number on your card has nothing to do with your checking account number or your account numbers at the financial institution. So it's really nice that you're not losing anything by, you're not opening yourself up to more risk by losing your debit card or anything like that. And then, with the prepaid debit cards, kind of the same story with credit cards too, but with the prepaid debit cards, oftentimes, unless the company that you're purchasing this card from has some kind of like verification or activation thing where you have to go online and actually like verify that the card is yours and kind of tie yourself to that particular card, then oftentimes there's just nothing that they can do. If you lose it, you lose it. There's no way to recoup the funds. But if you go and kind of like register the card, I have often seen policies where you can actually, as long as it's registered, if you lose it or whatever it's stolen, you can report it and they would issue you a new one with the remaining balance, similar to that debit card. But again, the big thing here is that you are checking with those financial institutions for how you actually are protected. So just make sure if that's something that's of concern to you that you reach out to the places that own those pieces. So how can you make the most of the cards that you have? The number one thing you can do is just be organized, right? If you're using a credit card, you want to make sure that you're paying things on time. You're not getting those late fees. You're not missing payments. Tracking your balances when it comes to debit cards and as debit cards especially, but prepaid cards as well, perhaps, right? You don't want to think you have $20, go to buy gas and you only have 15 and then, you can't get what you need. So track your balance, make sure that what you have in your account is what you're spending. Learn about the fees that are associated with those cards, because if you ever do get into a situation where, you might need to pay late or you might need to overspend in your checking account, you want to know what you're up against, right? Once in a while, accidents happen, emergencies happen, timing can be bad. So it definitely makes sense that, it's possible that those things could happen to you. So just understand what your fees are so that it either, helps you never do that or, helps you feel more comfortable, like, oh, okay, I only have to pay an extra $30 and not $300 or something, right? So know about the features that you have and the benefits that you have, and you want to make sure that you're using them to the fullest, taking advantage. Maybe you didn't realize your credit card had a cashback rewards program and you've never cashed in on it, and you could have used that money toward paying your bill down. So just different things like that. Make sure that you're looking at that and reaping the benefits that are available to you. So that's all we have for the card types. We have one last presentation, so I'll pause again for any questions. All right. So the last one we have to talk about is using your credit card. So one thing I've reiterated over and over and over throughout the whole presentation is paying your card in full and on time is the best way to be responsible about using a credit card. So what are the benefits of doing this? Number one, using your credit card, paying it in full and on time helps you build credit. It helps you, credit cards are an easy way to get that diversity in your credit bureau that we keep talking about too. Most people have some kind of steady loan or closed-end loan, like a car loan or a mortgage. And while those are both great kinds of loans to have, a credit card just kind of opens that up a little bit more and diversifies that for you. A lot of times too, credit cards are more affordable to be able to secure, to build your credit. So for instance, maybe you can't afford a $400 car loan every month, but you can afford a $35 credit card payment every month. So it's still a way to make consistent payments in full and on time, but at a much more affordable rate. Interest on credit cards is probably the scariest thing about them. They tend to have very high interest rates compared to closed-end loans or secured loans. So a lot of times this is what gets people in trouble. Yeah, they only borrowed a small amount, like $500, but because they couldn't pay it back, that interest just keeps compounding and compounding, and that $500 very quickly grows and grows and grows. Sometimes it can be very difficult to pay back. Sometimes it's impossible to pay back. So just making sure that you're paying them in full, that will avoid getting that interest added and added and added and get you out of that hole much faster. Try to stay out of debt if you can. I mean, that's everyone's dream. It's not always possible, but That is the best way to be responsible about your card. If you don't need to use your card, don't use it. If you have the money in your checking, use that, pay for it now. Don't get used to relying on your card when you have your checking account or you have other means to pay for something. And that way you can't spiral and you can't just keep using it and getting out of control. Obviously, paying it on time helps to avoid late fees. Late fees can be really large. Sometimes it's a daily late fee until the item is paid. So you really want to take a look at what kind of card you have and what the policies are of that financial institution so that you can avoid those late fees, because that is another big, kind of unexpected payment that you might have to make. The rewards are a great thing for you. So if it's something that, a card that really works, like maybe you travel a lot for work and you're always using gas, you're constantly filling up every week, maybe a credit card that has a high percentage of gas incentive on the card, whether it's cash back or double points or something every time you gas up, maybe that's something that might really work for you. So really take a look at the rewards and determine if that's something that, maybe makes sense for your lifestyle and your spending habit. Billing cycles are really important. A lot of times people think everything's due on the 1st or everything's due on the 15th. And while that's the most common times that things are due, you might have a billing cycle that is very short, like every 20 days. You might have something that's much longer, like every 45 days. And you might have something in between. Typically, most people are 30 days, so once a month. But if you're not on that normal monthly payment, having something due every 20 days can be very stressful, and having something due every 45 days can make you lazy and forget when something's due. So, it's very important that you kind of know what your billing cycle is, know when your payments are due, and that will help you to, again, make those payments in full and on time. Within your billing cycle, there's different things that end up happening. You might have purchases such as groceries or clothes. You could see a credit. Maybe you got a refund of something, you return something, and sometimes fees are added into those too. Maybe this is a fee for going over a certain amount in the grocery store or something. So you want to take a look at what is on your bill and make sure that things make sense. Because it's not just sometimes what you swipe, sometimes there are some of those unexpected things that you may not have realized. When your bill closes, you want to make sure that you're looking at your statement and making sure that everything on there is accurate. Also, again, if you are paying attention to your billing cycle, it's usually about 20 to 30 days after, each month is your cycle. So you'll want to make sure you're paying attention to those due dates. Sometimes there often is a grace period involved with credit cards. It's typically only 1 or 2 days before that next, before you would get a fee. But what's important to remember is that as soon as your first cycle ends, your second cycle still begins, even though you have a grace period for the first one. So that grace period doesn't mean that, your billing cycle starts after that's closed. It's included in here. So sometimes, if you're still not paying the first cycle or last month's bill, that could be accruing more interest with your second one because it's still accruing throughout. It's not waiting or pausing for you to make the payment. And typically with cards, it's a very short grace period, 1 or 2 days. Check up on your credit cards. Do you know when your bills are due, or do you just pay them when you have the money? And then you just end up being okay on time. Are you paying your bill early enough? Sometimes you have to make your payment before a certain date in order to not be charged interest. So you'll want to make sure you're taking a look at that and understanding your financial institution's policy on how those payments are made and how you can avoid paying that interest. And lastly, treating your card like cash. What this means is that if you treat it like cash, it means that you are using it how you would normally for regular expenses that you know you can afford, right? You wouldn't be able to bring cash to buy a car. So you can kind of think about it like that, but I might have cash to buy my groceries, right? So think about it in that kind of way, that you're only using your card for things that you can actually pay for and that you already have money in your checking account for, you already have money accounted for. So remember remember that credit cards are loans. They're not just mini loans, they are a true loan. Sometimes they're mini in the sense that you may not owe as much, but they are a loan. So that is something that people tend to forget with the card, and it can be, lead to some bad things. Make sure that you're only using your card within your normal budget. You're not spending more than what you would normally spend if you didn't have the card. And then try not to really rely on your card, save up for things. Don't just put the new, appliance suite in your kitchen on your credit card because you can. Maybe try to save up for half of it or for all of it, and deal with your ugly fridge for a little while. So don't forget that saving is still an option, really, is what the point we're trying to make here. Your credit card is not extra income. It's not extra money that you have kicking around. You are borrowing those funds. So just be really cognizant of that. Don't use your credit card to justify extravagant purchases. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And then don't postpone saving because, you have the card available. So, I could wait and save up for that, right? Patience is a really great thing to have. And sometimes credit cards really don't, help you be more of a patient person because you can get it right then and there. So really, really important to think about. So that is all the presentations that we have for you guys today. So I can hang around here for a couple of minutes and see if anyone has any questions.
And while we're waiting for any questions to come in, I'm going to put in the chat window a link to the survey. You can fill out information about what you liked about the program, what you didn't like. So give us suggestions about programs you'd like to see from us, and you can also give us your email for the gift card drawing. But also let us know if you want to sign up for the newsletter, because we got a lot of cool stuff going on this summer that we'd love for you to know about.
Right, I don't see any questions, so thank you so much. I really enjoy doing these things for you guys. So if you do think of anything, please reach out to the library, and or actually, you know what, I'll put in the chat my email address, and if you were to have any questions, you can certainly answer there. Send them to me. Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Amy. Have a good night.
Bye.